Hi, it's Nixalina. I would like to state now as a disclaimer that this episode is about domestic violence and physical violence and may be triggering and uncomfortable for many to listen to. If you are uncomfortable, I'll see you in the next episode. This podcast contains strong language and discussions about relationships, sex, and love. It may not be suitable for younger listeners. This is the Sex in Singapore City podcast, and I am Nixalina. This episode is called I Was in a Domestic Violence Relationship for 2 years at just 16. Here is my story. So in light of the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard toxic violent relationship in court, which is, of course, globally on everyone's tongue at the moment, it felt very topical for me to talk about my experience. But also, I have been putting off this episode for 4 seasons now, and I had it written down for season 5. And then I put it off some more, and I was like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Okay, God, this is going to hurt. Season 5 is just filled with such vulnerable, raw episodes that get to me when I try and talk about them. I feel like this is like the woke season, if you will. Okay, so yes, as the title states, when I was 16 years old, I met a man. He was 20. Through a girlfriend at school. It was her older cousin. I got swept off my feet. He was a lot shorter than me, which is information that will come up later, a lot shorter. He drove a car and he wasn't at school or anything. He was I can't even remember what he did. Bearing in mind I'm 35, right? So this was when I was 16. It's half my life ago. I was completely enamored and bowled over by him. What I didn't realize, because I was so young and such a romantic, was that he was starting to be abusive. But it was always very small. So it started off with getting annoyed if I don't know, got a text or a Facebook thing and then throwing my phone across the room. He would start telling me about my clothes. He didn't like my clothes. He didn't like if I dressed too sexy. But then if we went out with his friends, he would take the piss out of me if he thought I looked too frumpy. He didn't like it when I wore heels. So one time I actually got driven home. He picked me up to go to a restaurant. Had a massive go at me driving to the restaurant because I had heels on and I was taller than him, and then turned the car around, drove me home so I could get changed into flats and something less sexy. I was wearing jeans and a crop top. Jeans. And then I had to change because he was really angry. Then things like biting started. So he would bite my arms, the soft part inside my forearms, or my legs. And he would start stabbing pencils or pins in me. So I remember once I had this huge bite mark on my forearm, and it was bruised. So I had to get this big chunky bracelet and cover up the bite mark with the bracelet so I could go to school and go to work. I'm 16, right? When we met. And I had a part-time job at a photography lab in a chemist. So I would do all the photographs for customers. So I did that every Saturday and Sunday. And then, of course, I was doing my A-levels. So I was doing my AS levels, moving on to my A-levels. I would start to have bruises on my neck, where you held me too hard or perhaps bit me there. I remember once I tied a ribbon around my neck as try to make it as a trendy choker thing that was my fashion, when reality was I was covering up just these bruises, and I was living with my parents at the time, right? So I was constantly on edge about, my mum seeing it and going absolutely apeshit, which she would have. He would start to punch me. Like say we're in the car driving back from the shopping mall and I was upset or I said something he didn't like. He would start just punching me in the thigh while he was driving to shut me up, screaming at me. It was probably 6 months into the relationship before the abuse started happening. And I think I need to make that clear because it's not like, you go on date 1 and then suddenly he's punching you. It's a slow build-up. It's insidious, right? So by the time it did start happening and then it's just throwing my phone or it's just getting angry at my clothes or so that, then you don't realize the level of like this person and the damage they're calling you. I'm in love with him, right? I'm in love with him. And I started to think this was normal. I was the problem. I was too emotional. I was dressing too sexy. I knew when he started punching me that it wasn't right, but I was too ashamed to sort of say it out loud, and he always would turn it around so it was my fault. And yeah, this is hard. I knew this would be hard. Just so you know, let me just put this in now. This was when I was 16 to 18 and I'm 35. And it's still so hard to talk about it without getting this is the kind of damage that these types of relationships will do to people. So when you do tune into this court case with Depp and Heard, just know that whatever happened, this is it's next level damage. It's not a spectacle to be looked at like a TV show. It's these real people. Anyway. The physical violence started getting more and more obvious. I went to a club once. He was there and I was there and I was talking to guys that I know, friends from school. And he got really angry because I was talking to a guy and walked off and left the club and I ran after him. And we're in the street and he took his shoes off and threw them at me, hit me with his shoes, and then screamed at me because it was dark and he couldn't find his shoes. So I was running around these dark pavements trying to find his shoes for him. We then started walking back home to try and find a cab, and he took his belt off to try and belt me in the street. And luckily, police drove past at the time and pulled over, separated us because I was in distress, clearly, and asked me, are you sure you want to go home with this man? And I could only think, if they take me home, my mum will see that a police car's outside my house and dropping me off, and I'll be in so much trouble. So my preference was to stay with him. So I just lied. I said, no, we're fine. And him and I got a cab back to his, and he just shut the door on me. This was 4 a.m. by this point. It was pouring with rain, and he made me walk home. It was a 15-minute walk home from his house to my house after I'd declined a lift from the police. Even just that was just so horrible and abusive to do that to me, to make me think, I'm going to go and stay at his, and then he just shut the door on me and left me outside in the rain. Another incident, I broke my leg at a party. My boyfriend was having, a guy friend was having his 18th, whatever, and picked me up, fell on me. We both fell over and I broke my leg, right? So I'm in a cast. And my boyfriend would stand on the cast so I couldn't move and hold my head by my hair and punch me in the head. And it was I never did anything wrong to be his human punch bag. I was loyal. I loved him. He was just an extremely angry, abusive man by the age of 20. I remember He took me to a club during the day where his mum and family were and all of his friends. It was this big Mother's Day thing. We're all there. He was getting verbally abusive at me, and all of his friends were just sitting there in silence. And I turned around to them all and I was like, is none of you going to say anything? Is none of you going to stick up for me? And they all just sat in silence. They couldn't look me in the eye. So I went to the bathroom and his mum was in there and I was just crying my eyes out. And she said to me, his father is exactly the same. And it all depends whether you want to spend your next 25 years or so living this way. And I just couldn't believe it. That really stuck with me because I was like, oh my God, she lives the same. This is a cyclical, abusive family, and that's why my boyfriend is the way he is, because he's grown up that way. One of the worst times when it really started to escalate and then come out in public, because by this point, I'm able to hide the abuse, right? There is no, I hid the bite marks and the pencil stabs, you wouldn't see much, it would be a small bruise, could be just bump into the bed or something or furniture. But there was one moment where I couldn't hide it anymore. So my parents were staying with my sister. She lived in a different county at the time, so they were away for the whole weekend. My partner was staying at mine with me. And this is how old I am. I just got MSN, okay? To talk to people from school. And I got all their emails. Guys and girls from school, I got a list of emails to add to MSN. And he went through my bin and found the piece of paper with these emails on. And because it had guys' email addresses on there, even though they're just friends from school, he lost it. He started punching me, so I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in, and he broke the door in. It broke the lock and then dragged me out, and then the next thing I know, I wake up on the floor in the bedroom, and I can't really remember what had gone on, and he's just standing over me in shock. My face hurts and my head hurts and I just want to go to bed and sleep. So it seems like this, whatever happened when I woke up, it stopped his rage and we both went to sleep. And the next morning I was supposed to go to work. It's a Saturday. And I couldn't because I had bruises all over my face. And I had a door handle knob, a drawer handle knob circular thing imprinted on my face. And basically he had pushed me head first into the chest of drawers. Oh my God. I can't believe it's 15 years ago, and it's like it was yesterday. Oh, Nixalina, I can do this. Okay. He pushed me and I fell into the chest of drawers and I got concussion and knocked me out. And my face was mashed. So I called in sick for work. He goes off and plays football. He seems apologetic, but not really. He'd broke my phone that night. So he said he was going to go buy me a new phone. I then used the home phone to call my family and I just said, I fell over last night. I got drunk and I fell down the stairs. My mum was like, no, you didn't. No, you fucking didn't. You're lying. We're going to come get you. So my brother-in-law drove an hour to come and get me and take me back to where they were for the weekend. And I just remember seeing my family's face when they saw my face. It was just shock and anger and rage, but sadness. And I was trying to be my normal jovial self to try and not make it a thing. But this was the first moment where I had to publicly accept that it was obvious that I was being beaten at home. And I had to go to the school on Monday and people were making jokes. Obviously no one knew. And someone's like, this guy was like, lol, look at you. What, did you get beaten up at the weekend? And I just sort of like ran into the bathroom. I just cried because I had been beaten up at the weekend by the man I thought loved me. This is one of the few incidences at this point onwards. It gets worse. The abuse gets more regular. My mum, at this point, put a police report behind my back on him because I was adamant that I was in love with him. I didn't want to leave him. He was sorry. It was a one-time thing. And, of course, it wasn't. And, of course, I was, being emotionally played at this point as well. And I was 16. I was too young. Just too fucking young to be so violently treated like that. Then the cheating started. So I found cinema tickets in his pants and I questioned them, and of course I got slapped for that. But I started to think, like, you're taking women to the cinema. There was 2 tickets to this movie that I'd asked him to take me to watch. And he would just laugh it off or say I'm crazy or we went with a mate. And when I wouldn't accept that as an answer, he actually threw himself down the stairs in the house, and his mum was like screaming on the floor, and he made out like I'd pushed him. Oh, I hadn't touched him. I was terrified of touching him on any level. It was like he was trying to mask him being caught out cheating by doing something extremely dramatic, which it worked because I then ran out of the house. He then had a party that I wasn't invited to, a house party, and I was at a club nearby and obviously drinking. And I wanted to see him, so I walked to the house. And everyone was in shock that I was there and in shock that I had turned up. And it looked like people were thinking we weren't together, or like, what the fuck is she doing here? And his mate started tapping on a door. I was rageful, looking around all the bedrooms, trying to find out where he was. And I went to all the wrong rooms. And by the time I'd come back out of the other rooms, he was on the staircase doing his flies up, going, what the fuck are you doing here? So he'd obviously been fucking some girl in the room. And because he'd been caught out, and I'm like, you're literally doing your flies up in front of me, he went into rage. He pushed me around. He actually threw garden furniture chairs at someone, who then caused an epileptic fit in someone else. He called my mum and was like, come and get her. She's kicking off. She's lost it. So my mum drives down the road. I obviously get in the car, but I don't want to leave. I'm trying to find this girl. I can't find her. And then once I got in my mum's car, he taps on the window and I wind it down. And then he just started punching me through the window, like punching me in front of my mum. So she's terrified. So she just starts driving off and he's clinging onto the car. I kid you not. Like his belt buckle left a scrape in my mum's car door. And then he just fell on the floor after she managed to drive off and then like pretended she'd run him over, which she hadn't. So basically this was the start of the cheating thing when I started to realize there was someone else. He also once picked up a call of mine when I was trying to get hold of him, and he didn't realize he'd picked it up, and I could hear him and her together talking about their sex and stuff the next morning and how horny he was and things. And I just sat on the end of the phone just listening as in pieces. He takes me to a hotel for my birthday, and you're probably thinking, how is this not enough for you? How is this not enough? And I still let him lie his way through the cheating thing. I still wanted to believe so badly that I was crazy and he wasn't doing anything because I didn't want to lose him because I loved him so much. But we went to, a hotel for my birthday, and basically he got up early, went to the gym, and I managed to get into his phone, and I read messages between him and this chick that was obviously that he is in fact with her. And when he come back up from the gym, I said, like, I've just read your phone. And I wake up on the floor of the bathroom. I don't remember what happened. He's knocked me out again. My dad had just bought me this beautiful diamond necklace from Italy where my dad was living at the time. So it meant a lot because I didn't really have my dad around day to day. And he'd broken the chain, ripped it off my neck. And, I woke up feeling super fuzzy. I mean, it's another concussion, obviously, because he punches me in the head. So this was kind of like, okay, we're done. We are done. And I was devastated. I'm not going to lie. I was fucking devastated because I loved him. I had been so broken down emotionally and physically into like a shell of a woman I was. I was a size UK 6 and he would call me a fat cow all the time. Just made out constantly like I was worthless and I felt worthless. And then I'd get the highs of him as well, where he spoiled me and bought me things and took me to places, and I felt like the most special girl on the planet, and that's what I was living for. I was craving those moments. The final line in the sand was the most horrific. So I'm at the club near where he lives again, and the girl is there in the toilets, who he's now seeing. And I was like, yeah, I know that you're with him. And just so you know, he's still in love with me. And we never split up. Like, when you started seeing him, he was with me still. And she wasn't buying any of it. So I was like, here you go, here's a voicemail. So I gave her the phone and she listened to the voicemail of him begging me not to leave him, saying he still loves me. So I kind of felt like, yeah, okay, I've exposed him. She knows I'm not fucking crazy because that was the talk of the town. Nix has lost it. It's what he was telling all of his mates. I dumped her ages ago. And I had proof. I'd finally got proof and I'd finally shown the woman. So rather than going home, I took my ass to his house because I'm so emotionally messed up from this breakup. I miss him. I want to see him. And I walked to his house from the bar. And he'd obviously received messages from this chick who's saying, I've just listened to the voice notes. You obviously do love Nicola or whatever. And I don't know what she'd said to him. But once I got there, the rage was I've never ever experienced it before. So he ripped I had these like pearls on my neck. He ripped them all off. Told me to sit in the fucking living room. And he went and got a knife from the kitchen. Comes back in and holds the knife to my throat. And I genuinely thought, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me because I told the other woman that I still exist and that we were supposed to still be together and it was cheating on me. Obviously now, in hindsight, I understand that it was the narcissistic injury and I'd exposed him and that's why he flew into a huge rage. So I am at this point begging for my life. I'm still younger than 18. And the man I love has a knife to my throat because I told another woman that I exist. I don't know how long we were there for. But as soon as he lowered the knife, I ran, but he ran after me. So as I was trying to run to his front door, I couldn't get there in time. So I was trying to think of the only locked room in the house, which was the bathroom. So I ran upstairs to the bathroom, bearing in mind none of his family were around. They'd gone away somewhere, so it was just me and him. But before I could get into the bathroom and lock the door, he chased after me and he then punches me in the nose. And then I wake up on the bathroom floor again. He is actually, which I didn't realize, he'd actually given me like a deviated septum, like when he would punch me so often but he did always usually do it on the nose or the head. Yeah, and he like sort of semi-pushed in one side of it. So I woke up again on the floor, and that's usually when he'd stop, is when he'd knock me out. That's usually the trigger for him to stop. And I gathered my bag and my necklaces, what he hadn't broke. I tried to pick up some of the pearls, and then I walked home again. I don't know what time in the morning. And my first thought is always, oh, fuck, I hope there's no bruise. I hope there's no obvious bruise on my face. And that's the day I check the mirror, like, okay, fine. Even though everything is swollen and painful on the inside, it's like, as long as no one can fucking know and no one can see. Okay. So that was one of the most poignant parts where I realized, like, enough is enough. Because he got a knife out. Because he cheated. I'd actually previously accepted that physical abuse was, like, normal to me. And, yeah, this was like a line in the sand. And I know it sounds insane, me saying this out loud. You're like, the line in the sand should have been fucking at the very beginning. I'm like, I get it. I really get it. So I am now coming up to doing my A-levels, right? So I was actually with him between 16 to 18. So I'd done my AS levels, and then I'm getting to my A-levels, and I don't know how I did this, but I managed to somehow knuckle down in the last couple of months, and I actually got 2 A's and a B, and I got accepted into my first choice university to study English literature. I don't fucking know how I did it, because I was dealing through so much shit with him and pain and misery. And not only was I being physically and emotionally abused, I was also going through a breakup. And I thought like I'd lost the love of my life. I know it sounds insane. The main part of me getting over him was being able to go to university. So this happened around like my birthday, my 18th birthday in May, and I went to uni in September. So that summer where I was on my own, I was like really struggling because he also lives down the road from me and we were always going to the same places. But I managed to move hours away to uni, and that is really when I started to heal, when I met new friends, when I took myself out of the situation, and then I had counselling at uni as well. My first counselling, because I realised like, a year in, like I really need to talk about this. And over time, I healed myself. A few years later, I'll get like a Facebook message request from him, just apologising after he got married and a baby. I didn't want to know. A decade after, I actually saw him in a club. And I thought, if I ever see him again, I'm going to beat the shit out of him. So I kept thinking, if I ever see him again, now that I'm not some weak child, I'm actually a strong woman, I'm going to beat the crap out of him. And I saw him, and I went over to him, and I had nothing but pity. And I stood there in front of him, and he's so fucking short. He comes up to like below my tits. And I just stood there and was like, why? Just why? I was too young. And all he could do was mutter sorry and offer to buy me a drink. A drink. After all that damage, you want to buy me a fucking drink. And then I just walked away. And it's weird because you play scenarios over and over in your head and you think you'll behave in a certain way, and all I could do was just stand there and say, why? I've been through more than many have suffered in their whole lives by the time I was 18. And I still now feel the repercussions of it. And it wasn't just the physical pain, it was the emotional torture he put me through, the lying and the cheating. So, why am I sharing this story? Firstly, very cathartic for me. Secondly, I want you guys to understand that abuse doesn't happen immediately. And when you think, why would people stay? Why do you stay after the first fight? You're chucking bottles at each other. You're slamming doors. If it's getting even remotely physical, why would you stay? Because it's so deceptive and insidious and it creeps up on you. And you think you love this person. And you do. You do love this person. And if they've managed to manipulate you and emotionally brought you down first, you also don't think you're worthy of anything else. So you stay. You know it's wrong. When I woke up on those bathroom floors and those beds, I knew it was wrong. And then I started to worry about, if I get punched this much, is it going to, affect my brain? I was so terrified of any, long-term damage from so much abuse. He's done the worst to me. Stuck pens in me, pencils in me, bit me all over, hit me, gave me a deviated septum in my nose, pulled my hair, pulled me across the floor by my hair, stood on my broken cast to punch me so I couldn't move. Burns, he'd give me burns on the wrist, pretty much any kind of physical thing someone can do to someone. And I was a kid. I was a little girl. So, in light of this story, I want to end it on a positive note. Firstly, if anyone is going through anything remotely like this, you reach out to me and I will be there for you 24/7. Number one, I will help you through it. I won't judge the way you don't judge me. And I understand because I have literally been through it for 2 years myself. Secondly, I managed to harness myself, get 2 A's and a B at A-level. One of them was an English Lit A-level. It got me into the best uni I could for English literature. I had the best 3 years of my life at uni. I also managed to then start my own business. I created Sex in London City. 5 years later, I became so strong. And everyone always says, Nix, you're so strong and confident as a woman. How? How did you go through this? Often, people think that victims of domestic violence are weak, introverted, quiet little things. No, that's not the case. Anyone, male and female, introverted, extroverted, anyone can end up a victim in a domestic violent relationship, anyone. But what it did do for me is it taught me a lot about myself and about boundaries and how much I love people. It taught me about, defending myself, physically defending myself. I know it's ridiculous, but I'm I can take a punch, and I know I can. And I don't know why that gives me strength out of that. I guess because there's nothing else I can take from that physical part of it except I know I can take it. And I could probably, at this age and this physical part, give it back as well. I was just very young, thin and vulnerable at the time and weak, I guess, across the board. Whilst I would never, ever wish this on my worst enemy, and whilst I believe that was a catalyst to some really hard years of relearning myself and how I interact with men and relationships and whatnot, part of me doesn't regret going through it. I know that sounds very strange, but it does. I would not be the woman I am today without that, I don't think. I mean, you never know, right? But I have so much strength now, and I've suffered, and I'm all right. And not only am I all right, I'm doing way better than I ever could have dreamed. And I managed to focus in the worst moments of my life and still get my qualifications and still go off and get my degree. And I'm managed to heal. And I just want anyone who's going through this to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you can get there. You just, you need to obviously leave the person and then do all of the work on yourself. And it takes years. And as I said, I'm over 15 years plus out of it. And I still get upset recalling it. So there you go. That's how long-term the damage stays. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And if this has triggered or affected anyone, please reach out to me. There are also hotlines that you can call to speak to professionals about this. I will put them in my little bio on the episode, so to try and help you guys out. But yeah, and breathe. Thank you so much for sticking with me, and here's to a brighter, happier next episode. Thanks for listening to the Sex and Singapore City podcast. This episode was produced and hosted by me, Nick Selena, and recorded at the Splicecast studio in Singapore. I'm available to listen to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and all major podcast listening apps. Do subscribe to enjoy a new episode every Monday evening. Please do give me a 5-star review. It helps other people also find my podcast. For more awesome content and features to read, you can check out my website, sexandsingaporecity.com. That's sexandsingaporecity.com. I'm also on social media. Simply search at Nick Selena, Nixalina, to find me. Don't be shy. Come say hi.